welcome to this CelerData webinar. Today we're gonna talk about user behavior analytics. Um, let's give it like 30 more seconds for everybody to join. If it's your first time joining CelerData webinar, welcome. My name is Sita Shen, and I am a product marketing manager here at CelerData. Also, I am a product manager for the StarRocks database core. So, welcome if it's your first time. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. Hope you enjoy this 30 to 45-minute session. We're going to talk about user behavior analytics, and I'll be the speaker and the host for you today. Okay. What time is it? Yeah. 01. Let's get started. Okay. So today we're gonna talk about user behavior analytics and how to make user behavior analytics work for you. So let's first go over the agenda, right? So first, we'll cover what is exactly user behavior analytics and why do we need it, right? And then we're gonna dive into some user success stories, specifically StarRocks user success stories. I picked three interesting stories out of a bunch and from industry leaders like Tencent Games and more, right? And then we're gonna cover user behavior analytics use cases. So it's gonna be a little bit of event analysis, funnel analysis, retention analysis, and those kind of use cases, right? And the difficulties with them, right? And what kind of business value those use cases can bring for a business, for your business, right? And then we're gonna go into a demo with CelerData Cloud using a real data set, a real e-commerce data set, right? And we're gonna showcase like how you can do user behavior analytics with e-commerce on CelerData Cloud with SQL only, right? And then we're gonna go back to the deck and we're gonna cover how StarRocks enables user behavior analytics. And it's gonna be a short technical breakdown of the features that StarRocks offers that enables easy user behavior analytics, right? Okay, so let's start it. Let's first talk about what is user behavior analytics. So before we start at all, it's something we want to talk about, right? Like while you're building a product or building a service, offering a service, right? Feedback is always one of the most important factor, right? You're getting feedback from anywhere, right? Ideally from your user, right? That's not even for building a product or service. That's like doing anything in life, right? Like from studying how the user interacts with the product or the service, right? We learn a lot of stuff, right? And is there any friction in the user journey, right? It's a product that's being built solve the user's problem, right? And this is something that is very important, right? And some personal story. I am a product manager for Zara's core, so the database itself, right? And I really value user feedback. And thank God we're open source. So every week I dedicate a few hours, talking to users and hear about how our product sucks, and how the feature I developed still lack something, right? So we can go back and fix them, right? To get rid of all of the frictions in the user journey and make the product uh, much better, right? Like for user experience, right? And this we do that through studying user behavior, right? And so user behavior analytics really provide data-driven insights for for long-term or short-term business decisions, like from like say for a 2C scenario, right? Like running a promotional activity, or like longer term, right? Like to like product design, which feature should a business build or should a product have, right? And those can like like studying user, how the user interact with your product can really help with that, right? And let's define what is user behavior analytics. So user behavior analytics derives insights from user actions, right? A user does something and does creating kind of like an event, and that is what we want to study, right? So user behavior analytics focuses on studying the user and the actions of that product and service, right? So we what we can get from that is we can identify issues and potential optimizations that we can do to the product service, right? And then can really facilitate decision making, short term, like target promotion, to long term, strategic planning and stuff. Covering the last slide. Okay, so here come the story time. So here I'm gonna cover some user success stories, StarRocks user success stories, utilizing user behavior analytics to scale their business, to scale their revenue, right? And the first example is Tencent Games. Tencent Game is the biggest gaming company in the world, and is home to hundreds of popular titles. That's including League of Legends and PUBG, right? Those big titles with tens of millions of like concurrently active user, right? Um, at a scale that Tencent Game is operating on, serving hundreds of millions of players worldwide, there is no decision that for them that's trivial, right? Like designing a button, like the color of a button can be for them at their scale. There's a lot of weight to it, right? So whatever decision they make, they always do thorough testing, right? So they run A/B testing on almost all of the decisions that they make, like on in-game promotion activities. And this is actually a bigger decision to a smaller decision, like what is the color of a button, right? Um, yeah. And so how A/B testing works is basically, you divide your users into multiple, two or more um, evenly distributed groups, and you give them each group a different treatment, right? A different method or a different treatment that you want to test, right? And it depends on whether one performance performs better, it has a statistic or significant advantage over the others, and that's the one you're gonna choose, right? That's how to make a data-driven decision, right? But the problem is, what is a metric, right? What is a metric? How do we measure which treatment is better than the other one, right? What Tencent Games, what they do is that they use user behavior analytics to generate the metric that supports A/B testing, right? You can say, okay, an easy metric can be how much revenue this generates, right? But there's so much more that we can mine from user behavior, from users action, how the user interact with the game, right? Like how many players how many online players there are, right? How many registrations and how many paid events, or even how many messages they send to each other. And there are just a million, millions of metrics we can mine from the user behavioral data, right? That can support this. And I think this is large part of the reason why Tencent's games promotional like activities, they've been so successful, and the business grown so much over the years, right? It's all based on like data driven decision making, right? This is Tencent Games. And the second one I want to share is a leading ride sharing company. And this is actually DD Global. right? This is a ride sharing company, operates like Uber, but they actually are bigger in terms of like daily average rides. I think they clocks in around like 30 million rides per day. So it operates just like a Uber, like Uber app, right? So this platform has two types of users. One type is the rider, uh, and the other one is the driver, right? So the rider pulls out the app and put in the destination, call for a ride, and the driver comes, pick him up, and drive to the destination, right? Pretty straightforward, right? And what they do is pretty interesting with user behavioral data. Um, so because it's real time, I like real time. And so they collect and monitor real-time aggregated metric on many dimensions. And this dimension can be, different regions and, geospatial, uh, like locations, and also like user groups and user segments. And they collect a lot of metrics like the number of app opens, right? And the number of order that's placed in that region during that period of time, right? So they can accurately predict the short term demand of a small area during a specific time. So they can, so this thus they can provide a better user experience for both the riders and the drivers, right? And for the riders, that is, minimize the wait time, right? For the riders, and for the drivers, is minimize travel time, for the driver to pick up the rider, so the whole system runs more efficiently, right? And this whole system, it's all based on user behavioral data, right? And they actually use StarRocks to fetch that data, and SQL rule base plus some machine learned algorithm, and that to create a really good user experience for both their riders and drivers. So the third one is a leading entertainment service company that use StarRocks. Right. So this company, what they do is they have on-demand video streaming service platform, and they actually have like 200 million plus monthly active user. So a lot of people are using their platform. So the on-demand videos are like TV shows or movies, right? Um, and so you just log in and watch your TV show, and you pay a subscription fee to that platform, like monthly or annually. Um, and they use user behavior data or user behavior analytics for mainly two purposes. The first one is real time, right? And they do real time monitoring of those user behavioral metrics, like how many views this one piece of content gets, or how many likes, or the average watch time or cumulative watch time, um, to run like targeted promotions, recommendations, and also they use this data to maintain a real-time trending board, right? And that's probably different for each region and different for each user group, right? And they do it in real time, so they measure those metrics to basically up level their recommendation quality of the recommendation, right? And this is real time. And the second, what they do is a little more difficult to explain. So it's a big platform with a lot of users, right? Some of the content the platform makes by itself, but some of the content are from third-party producers, right? And there needs to be a way to share the revenue with the third-party producer, right? To produce um, the content, right? And this ratio is actually not a set ratio. It's a pretty complicated process to come up with that ratio in the end, right? In the time of the revenue sharing. So basically, if the quality of the content is higher, so the third party producer gets a bigger share, and vice versa, right? And how to determine this ratio? They use user behavior analytics so to from the data that generated by user interacting with the content, and they can come up with a ratio uh, that's data driven, right? That's mined from the data. That's fair, right? Okay, so yeah, so these are the three cases I found in the StarRocks community, and they're pretty interesting, but there are a ton more. Like, there is a insurance company that sells insurance, and they do a bunch of like retention and funnel analysis. We're gonna go into those like later in the presentation. And also those many e-commerce company that use StarRocks to do funnel and retention analysis. And actually, we're gonna have a demo in a little bit. Okay. And then let's go a little bit into the use cases, right? So we hear about a lot of the stories, but like what exactly can we do with user behavior analytics, right? So the first type is event analysis, right? This is like the fundamental to all user behavior analytics workload, right? Actually, all of the three I've mentioned before are event analysis. So for an event is every user's action, right? So event analytics is basically study the aggregated results of the event to make, like more data-driven decisions. One example to do this is through a dashboard, right? A dashboard has metrics and you can monitor the metrics and know the business change in real time and adjust your strategy like based on uh, the insights you derive from the metrics, right? And those metrics can be website traffic or like number of users, number of active users, total amount of pay events during a specific window of time, right? And this is event analysis. And then you have retention analysis. Retention analysis is how many customers continue to use a product or service over time, right? And this, what it does one thing very well. It measures and it identifies customer churn, right? So the retention rate is basically, the percentage of the customers who continue to use a product or service, right? Say if you start with 100 users, January the 1st, you have 100 users. And in February the 1st, 1 month later, that same 100 user, 90 of them are still using your product. And then you have a retention rate of like 90%, right? And you have 10% that churned during that 1 month, right? But for a retention analysis, this is to identify uh, churn. But why do they churn? We need more information, right? And this is where the funnel analysis comes in. Funnel analysis basically studies and visualizes the steps that user or customer go through to complete a action or a series of actions, right? One example is on the bottom right. So this is a kind of like an e-commerce scenario, right? Let's assume from page view to payment, the customer actually pay for a product. There are several steps, right? Page view, add to cart, purchase, and payment, right? Let's say page view, you have all of the users, and each step is a chance for the customer to churn. And by getting this information, like how many people are left in each step, you can know like which part in the process uh, that has the highest amount of friction, right? Like which part is the highest chance that the customer is going to churn, so you can go ahead and fix it, right? So it's particularly useful for understanding, conversion rate each step and fix if something goes wrong, right? And this has a wide range of applications, like in e-commerce, just talk about, or in like a mobile app, onboarding a mobile app from app download to account creation to the first action and and to like regular daily usage, right? Or a subscription service, um the video streaming computer talking about, right? So first time you visit the landing page? Do you sign up for account? If you sign up account, do you start to use a trial? And do you actually put your credit card in and start a subscription, right? And for marketing campaigns too. Okay. Okay, so here let's do a demo of all of the things we really talk about. And this is an actual data set from Taobao. This is like the eBay in Asia, right? This data set I actually randomly found it on Kaggle, and it's very good because it's very lean. So it only has 5 columns: user ID, item ID, category ID, and this is a category of the item, and behavioral type and timestamp, right? I think all of them are pretty self-explanatory. And there are 4 behavior types. So first is favorite. So you click a heart on the item. And the next one is cart. It means adding the item to your cart. And then buy is when you actually purchase the item. This is the final step, right? And page view, this is actually the first step. Okay, so I'll stop my share and go into CelerData Cloud. Just give me 1 sec. Hope you guys can see my screen. Let me double check. Okay, we're on. So I already loaded all of the data into CelerData Cloud. And let's take a look. Use a demo. Let's explore the data set, right? Like what it does. Okay, so this data set is not big, only has around 87 million rows. That's 87 million rows. And these are the same just show in the PowerPoint deck. So you have the 5 features, or the five columns, right? User ID, item ID, category ID, behavioral type, and timestamp, right? So each user action is a role. Each user action is an event, which is a role in this whole data set, right? And let's take a look at the overall statistic of this data set. So there are around a million unique users. This is, I think, like 4 million unique items on like 10,000 categories. 4 behavioral types we already went over. And this is the data spanning from November the 25th to December the 2nd, right? All 87 million records, all 87 million actions. And to just take another look at the behavioral type. So you have page view, favorite, add to cart, and buy. I love this data set. It's so clean. So good for a demo. And this is a typical action of a user, right? This user ID 524 on the item 315, right? We can see that on the 30th, he viewed this product or this item twice and did a purchase, right? And somehow he came back and viewed the product several more times. I don't know why, but he did, right? And this is like on the bigger picture what the data set looks like. And let's get started, right? Imagine you're an analyst, right? So first, you do something that's pretty routine, right? And you take a look at um, the the sum of active users per day, right? You write a simple like count distinct query here, and you look at how many active users are in these couple days. You see, December the 2nd, there are a little more than usual, right? probably we ran some kind of promotional activity on the first. We don't know, but the analyst would know, right? And then we take a look at the sum of the purchase, right? Sum of purchase uh, during this span of time. You can see the second is still a little more than before. The others are all like 130K, and this one is 170K, right? This is definitely not it has a statistical significance difference, right? And then let's take a look at the retention, right? Let's say like exactly what happened there. So in StarRocks, there's a retention function, right? Let's first take a look at from the 27th to the 28th, right? Oh, let me select the database, right? And so what this means is that this number is the number we want to pay attention to, right? From the 27th to the 28th, out of all of the people that visited this page visited this e-commerce site, visit Taobao on the 27th, out of those people, how many people visited it again on the 28th, right? And this ratio is a retention ratio, right? So on the 27th to the 28th, it's like 78%. 29th to the 30th, 80%. 30th to the first, 80%. And then we look at the last day, and that's like 25%. And that's not caused by the new users. So somehow, whatever we're doing, we're pulling the old uh, users from that login on the first again on the second, right? And this is probably some promotional activity we've done on the first, right? And this number looks good, right? But we still want to know like exactly what caused this. And then we go into the funnel analysis. Okay, so to do a funnel analysis, we first need to kind of assume a user path, right? To go from the first step, page view, to buy. So this let's just assume the typical user path is, the user take a look at the page, right? Do a page view and add the item to cart and then click buy, right? This is the shortest path to purchase, right? And then we define 30 minutes as one session, which means that the time between the first page view action to the buy action cannot exceed 30 minutes, right? And let's see what happens here. So, okay, so the numbers are here. So what this means is that from page view to cart, only 28.8% of the users survive this step. And from cart to buy, only 7% of the user survive this step, right? So the retention is good. It's 90%. But that's not all. Retention, we're only looking at the active users. But here we're actually looking at each step, how many users, go through this each step, right? So we get more information and it's not as good as we thought. And the time constraint we put here is the second, is December the 2nd, right here, right? And what more can we do? Now we know the retention ratio is not good. So what about let's figure out which item ID is not really performing, right? And this is something we can look at. And this is basically the ranking of the item ID from the worst performing one, the retention ratio. Let's see, this item is seriously wrong with this item. The retention ratio is only, I don't even know how many percent. Is it 0.5%? 0.5%, right? And we want to look at why, right? And here, let's look at whatever happened with this item ID, right? With this item ID, what happened? What are the behavior that the users that did not purchase this item, whatever they did, right? You see, count 1,000, like 1,500 or almost 1,600 of them did the page view and just gone. And 52 did a page view and another page view. And 10 did a page view and another page view and another page view, right? So this tells us that most of the user just got stuck on the page view part. So there's probably something wrong with the description of the item, or there's something wrong with the page, right? And that's something we can get started to work on, right? And you actually see a buy here, a page view and a buy. And this actually, I did some more investigation. It's because both of these two cases exceeded 30 minutes, right? So it's probably not even, the page view and the buy is probably not even on the same product. So that actually somehow explains that the half an hour time session length makes sense. Okay, I hope this made sense. And if you want to learn more about this or look at the sequel, uh, you can visit the StarRocks discussion channel. So there is so this is the whole thing is posted here. Okay, and go to discussion. The easy way to find it is just all top, and this one, the first one is this. Okay, this is pretty fun. Okay, now I'll try to go back to the slides. Okay. Hope everyone can see my screen. Okay, so yeah, that was a demo. I hope you guys liked it. And let's then talk about the challenges of user behavior analysis, right? So the first one is definitely massive amount of data. So user behavior, just imagine a website with 10 million daily active user, and every mouse click or anything you do on the website is an entry in the database. Probably not even what you're doing, right? Your network latency, or like many other monitoring, are all like part of the data set. So for user behavior and analytics, the data size is insanely big, right? uh and this creates a lot of problem. Like the example we're using, the demo we did on only 87 million rows of data, we do a count distinct on that. I actually didn't do any optimization on that, but that result returned instantly, right? But imagine doing that on 87 billion rows of data without a lot of optimization. Running a count distinct on that scale, on the data on that scale, is quite challenging, right? And the second challenge is mainly on the real time needs. And some of the user behavior analytics workload, like the one that Didi, the ride sharing company were doing, or some of the Tencent games use case, it requires the data to be fresh as possible, and the query to be as fast as possible, so they can make the business change while it still matters, right? So real time is definitely a difficulty, a challenge of user behavior analysis in some scenarios. And user behavior analytics, the data come from different systems. And from what I see in the field, it's often semi-structured data, right? It's never in a like a nice tableau form, right? So being able to deal with semi-structured data like JSON is a thing that the database needs to be good at, right? And the last challenge, I think, this is really unique to user behavior analytics, is the analytics itself is tightly coupled with business logic, right? Although there are a bunch of proprietary, people try to come up with a solution that solves all user behavior analytics problem, but it's just not gonna it's not gonna be feasible because every business is different and every interaction between the user and the product is very different. So this most of the time needs a lot of customization, and the database needs to support that, right? And what StarRocks offer for user behavior analytics is first for data ingestion, right? StarRocks natively supports semi-structured data type such as JSON, so you can just ingest the JSON data as Tableau form in StarRocks, or just store them as JSON and query them and get good performance, right? And StarRocks natively supports ingesting real-time data, whether it's append only or with data upserts. StarRocks supports both and get like second level freshness of data, right? And StarRocks has a lot of proprietary functions tailored for user behavior analytics. If you don't really have that much need for customization, and this can be good. And like what we showcased, the retention function and the window funnel function, the two were introduced in version 2.3. I think a friend at Tencent Games actually contributed the window funnel function. Thank you. And yeah, and a lot of users been loving it and using them a lot. And what else? And count distinct, the like for count distinct, when the data scales on a large scale, count distinct becomes a incredibly difficult problem to solve, right? But StarRocks has bitmap and HLL hyperlog log to do to perform exact count distinct and approximate count distinct, right? And you can utilize the synchronous materialized view to seamlessly accelerate your count distinct performance, right? Let's say you have a table here, advertiser view record, and you have a user ID that's an int, right? And your typical query is count distinct of the user ID. So you're probably counting the number of unique users uh, clicked on something, right? on the advertiser and the channel, on two dimensions, right? And what you can do is create a synchronous materialized view and use bitmap to accelerate this count distinct operation, like using bitmap. What synchronous materialized view does is two things. First is real time. So the materialized view and the base table, the raw data are always in sync, right? So all of the materialized view update are handled at data ingestion. And because all of the updates are incremental, so it's actually not that expensive to do for the database itself. So we can keep up, you can have very small batch ingestion like every 5 seconds, and the materialized view are able to keep up. So it's good for those real time use cases, right? And then it enables query rewrite. So you write a query like this, a count distinct query. So it's gonna be automatically routed to this bitmap union to bitmaps phrase to seamlessly accelerate your query without changing your SQL, right? And this is great. And also, StarRocks supports lambda function, right? Um, Lambda function is a anomalous function. Can be used as input to a higher order function. So what is used a lot is in arrays, right? So you can pass functions or expressions in arrays. And what this does is you can use lambda function to rewrite or to implement your own version of the retention or window funnel function, right? For window funnel and retention, there are many edge cases, or um, for different businesses, they really want different things, right? The proprietary function can only do so much. If your needs are kind of primary, like what I showed before, be okay. But if you want more customization, lambda function is the way to go. Okay. And this is really all I have. Um, thank you. Is there any questions? See your question. What are some of the issues you face at scaling your at scale for user behavior analytics that you don't face at a lower scale? So basically everything. So like even for account distinct operation, it can be so much more expensive when your data size is huge. And for user behavior analytics, you're always running a lot of high cardinality aggregations, right? And and this is where we're gonna see a lot of the performance bottleneck. And StarRocks supports, like in-memory data shuffling. So for high cognitive aggregation, we can scale really well. But still, in some cases, with like petabytes of data, or in the higher hundreds of terabytes of data, we still face issues there. And so that's when the user can utilize uh, other like acceleration methods, like the bitmap, and to use materialized view to accelerate this process. All right. And I think that's all.